Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, your host, joined by Gerry Hamilton of On Texas Football. Gerry, we're talking a little recruiting today, but we're going to take a little broader angle picture, kind of like we did earlier this week with the class of 2022. We're going to look at the class of 2023. I categorized the class of 2022 as the foundational class for Steve Sarkisian. Just looking at the numbers and how many people have participated and been a major part of the team at this point from that class, including all 7 offensive linemen to one degree or another. Such a great class. And like I said, the foundation for what Steve Sarkisian is building in Austin. The 2023 class, I'm labeling something a little different. I think it's the breakthrough class for Texas. Already, I'm looking at 5 guys from the class of 2023, just only in their sophomore years, that are already starting for the Longhorns. Anthony Hill, Cedric Baxter, Derek Williams, Manny Muhammad, and Jonte Cook. Those guys are expected to start this year. And then we have a list of others, including Arch Manning, that we can go through in that group. What do you think of this group? And do you agree with the terminology of the group that is the breakthrough class for the University of Texas?
Yeah, I think breakthrough class is a good term to use. I mean, Arch Manning was a breakthrough recruit. Anthony Hill was a breakthrough flip. Cedric Baxter, number 1 running back in the country out of Florida. I mean, you just got Derek Williams, 2 safety in the country out of Louisiana. So from a recruiting standpoint, it was the breakthrough class. And I think this class has already, even though they're young, just going into year 2, already starting to deliver on the field in a big way for the next 2-3 seasons for the Texas Longhorns.
Well, we talked about it on Thursday, about how you want 12 to 13 players in each recruiting class to really be starters and or key depth. Well, yep. I just already mentioned 5 guys. There's already 10 more, I think, that are going to be key depth pieces for the Longhorns. That pushes this number easily to 15 already out of the gate. They signed 25 total. So you're talking about hitting on 3 out of every 5 guys in a class. That's a good hit rate. The other guys that I listed as key depth and or long-term starters for the Longhorns, obviously Arch Manning is one. Then you have Trey Wisner at running back. Yep. DeAndre Moore is another one at wide receiver. Offensive line, Jaden Chapman and Trevor Gooseby. Clear guys there. Colton Vasek. I think it's clear that you can say that he's going to be a defensive lineman to be considered later down the line. Then at linebacker, both Darian Gillette and Leon Galafau are possibilities too. Followed up by safety, Jelani McDonald, and cornerback, Warren Roberson, who's running second team right now. That's 10 guys that are already in the 2 deep, in addition to the 5 starters, Gerry. Then you look at the other 5 that are in this category. Connor Stroh, Tassilia Connor, we're waiting to see what he does. Ryan Niblett, and then the 2 tight ends, Spencer Shannon and Will Randall, waiting to see exactly if they become key depth pieces for the Longhorns, or even go further than that in one case or another. There have been 3 guys that have transferred out already, which is not a lot considering there were 25 signees. Peyton Kirkland was the first to act. Then Samaje Burrell, the linebacker, Kirkland, the offensive lineman out of Florida. Then Billy Walton, defensive end edge out of South Oak Cliff to SMU. You look at all that, Gerry. The strength of this class isn't just at the top. It's at the overall depth. I mean, you start talking about adding guys like Colton Vasek, Jaden Chapman, Trevor Gooseby, Trey Wisner, Darian Gillette. I mean, those are guys that are going to provide depth for the Longhorns and either be starters or big time depth pieces for Texas, at least this year, if not into next year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you look at that, I think this class has a little bit of everything that's starting to develop. You have a quarterback in Arch Manning, who's going to be a multi-year starter. You have a pair of running backs, Cedric Baxter and Trey Wisner. Both are hits in whichever way you want to term them hits. And they're different guys, but they're both going to be guys that score touchdowns for Texas and make plays for Texas. Wide receiver, Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore. Be interesting there to see how many either of those guys start long term or if they're just part of the rotation long term, because there's a lot of competition from the portal and Ryan Wingo pushing those guys. But those guys have made big plays. But even if it's a spring game, they're starting to show that they can be contributors on a winning football team. And DeAndre Moore, one of those late flips, by the way, in recruiting. But then you mentioned tight ends. The offensive line is going to be so interesting because they're going to need 2 or 3 of those guys to become starters for at least a year, maybe multiple years. If they lose all these guys pro after this year, as we expect them to do, Trevor Guzman or Jaden Chapman, one of those guys can come through and be a multi-year starter for Texas, in my opinion. And then, at the guard spot, whether it be Connor Stroh or Kojo, they need one of those guys to come on, maybe compete for a starting job, be a key depth piece if it's an 8-man rotation moving forward on the offensive line. Linebacker is so key. I think Leon Galafau could be a starter at Texas. I think Darian Gallett's a wild card. You look at that linebacker group, Tassili Khan, if you call him a linebacker, designated pass rush specialist. They have some guys with some skill sets that are different from each other that can contribute to winning, can impact winning if they're a depth or rotational piece. So I really like this class. I like where this class is headed. One big one for me, you mentioned Warren Roberson. I think Texas needs him to come on in this class. He's got all the athleticism. He's got the skill set. Now it's just about trying him on the field, not blowing the coverage, understanding the playbook, understanding the coverages, being consistent in that. That's one guy they need to come on. But this class as a whole, and then Jelani McDonald, see what he develops into now that he's found the home at safety with all that talent, with all that size. What does he look like a year from now? I think it's going to be very interesting for Texas. But this class, Colton Vossick, if he stays healthy, that elevates this class because he is going to make plays if he's on the football field, if he's healthy enough to stay on the football field, which he wasn't in year one. Then in the spring he was, and he had a really good spring game. If they can keep him healthy and they can maximize what he do, that's going to elevate this class as well.
Well, I look at it, and you mentioned that secondary. They've already got 2 starters out of it with Derek Williams and Manny Muhammad.
Yep.
At least starter minutes out of both of them.
Two future draft.
Yeah, you add Roberson and McDonald being more complete players to that group. That's a really strong defensive secondary out of a single class. You were mentioning those linebackers, Jerry, like LaFau, like Gallette. Well, Anthony Hill has already made his mark too. Yeah. And so that could be a really special group. You talk about how Cedric Baxter and Trey Wisner are kind of a Mutt and Jeff of sorts, right? As far as running back position, how they are a little bit different, but complementary in that fashion. I look at this, and again, all of that to be said, I feel like this is Sark's breakthrough group because not only do they have the top end guys, they had some top end guys in the 2021 class, by the way. They had some top end guys in the 2022 class. This is the one where it's not only top end guys, they got them 1 to 20 really guys that can contribute to this team. They're going to have at least 15 guys in the 2 deep as true sophomores. I don't care where you go, what you look at. That's really, really strong for the Longhorns.
And look at it, and I'll add to that. How many different positions do they have a player where they could be drafted at? Quarterback, we think so with Arch long term, right?
Yeah.
Sky's the limit. Running back, Cedric Baxter is going to be a draft pick. Wide receiver, will DeAndre Moore, Jonte Cook? Quite possibly, right? Tight end, not sure. Offensive line, chances are Jaden Chapman or Trevor Gooseby ends up being a draft pick. It may not be Kelvin Banks or Cam Williams level, but then you go, D-line is the issue in this class with Sadir Mitchell, not kind of coming on and being what we thought he would be, the guy that Georgia and Texas battled for more than once. That seems like an NFL player in recruiting, but that hasn't happened. Edge, if Colton Vossick stays healthy, but linebacker with Anthony Hill. Defensive back, we've mentioned too, Derek Williams and Muhammad are draft picks. This class has a number of draft picks at different positions. That bodes very well for the next 3 seasons or 2.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it, you think Hill, Baxter, Williams, Muhammad, Cook, Manning, that's at least 6 draft picks out of it. Then you start talking about guys like LaFau, McDonald, Wisner, Gillette, Gooseby, Chapman, Vosick. I mean, all in all, it all depends on what they put on the field.
Yeah.
But it's a high, and that doesn't even mention, to your point, Sadir Mitchell, who has a load of potential. He's just got to get it out of himself right now. You add him, if he actually reaches his potential over time, kind of like what Tavondre Sweat did, then you're looking at another high-end guy, most likely for the Longhorns that is really, really impactful. Is there, have there, I want to go from here.
Bob, I was going to say, if you got 9 or 10 NFL Combine invites out of this, you with a class, all right? That's about all you could ask for as far as developing talent.
I completely agree. That's all you can do is hope to get there. I will say this. Are there any surprises out of this group at this point for you? I circled one that has been a surprise to me, and that's been Trey Wisner. And I say that because, so much was made about Cedric Baxter as he was being recruited. Number 1 running back, yada, yada. I don't know that anybody expected this of Trey Wisner, except for maybe Trey Wisner himself. Right. What do you think about that? Is he the surprise of this class in your perspective so far?
I think headed into year 2, he's the surprise of this class. And I think that's going to show up not only in running back in his role as a slasher and as a playmaker, but in special teams, which has already shown up. I think his willingness and his buy-in to go with his talent, it elevated him pretty quickly in this class and in the Texas program. I will say this. I think by the end of the season, he'll be joined by somebody else in this group. Is that going to be Leonga LaFau? We'll see. But there's going to be somebody else pop into that category by the end of this season. Could it be Jelani McDonald? I mean, we'll see. But that's what I love about this class is there's been one guy that's kind of surprised so far. Now, this is the year where a couple of other guys are going to jump into that category and kind of elevate themselves from what we were thinking last spring to what we're thinking by the end of the season.
Look, obviously, Sadir, I'll give you another category here. Obviously, Sadir Mitchell is the one guy that Texas needs to come through. Literally needs a big defensive tackle to come through. Other guys that you think and feel strongly will come through. One of them for me is Colton Vosick. Your point is well made about his injury history. At the same time, you and I both love what he puts on the field when he gets the opportunity.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, look, he's a guy that he can be a 3-down player if he's healthy. He is strong against the run. He understands leverage. He understands hand place. But then he can also just get after the quarterback through motor and technique as much as first or second FBGO. So he is a guy that can be an impact player, an NFL upside draft pick if he can stay on the field and stay healthy. But by the way, Bobby, I want to mention this. There's 2 other guys that need to come through. One of them has to come through for Texas, and that's Jonte Cook and DeAndre Moore. And I say that not because they're behind schedule, maybe like Sadir Mitchell is, but because they're now in a position to have real opportunity. Last year, first year learning a system, it was tough for at the wide receiver position as a freshman in Steve Sarkisian's system, even if you were an early enrollee. Then Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, they were going to get the lion's share of the snaps. This year, we think Sark is going to expand that. Rod Babers calls it circle of trust, play more guys in the rotation. So one of those 2 guys needs to come through for Texas. Those are 2 receivers that were highly ranked nationally that you think, okay, they could be NFL Combine guys one day. But one of those 2 guys does need to come through for Texas because when you get 2 receivers that highly ranked out of high school, you don't want 3 years to look back and say neither one of those guys ended up being the contributor we thought they'd be. One of those two guys needs to come through for Texas in this, and it begins this season because Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore, they're going to have plenty of opportunities, which they first began to get in the spring. But again, one of those two guys needs to become that multi-year starter for Texas.
Yeah, Cook expected to start this year, at least now. But that's before, I will say this, that's before fall practice. We've heard that Ryan Wingo is coming on so strong. Silas Bolden also joined the crew this summer. A young man transferred out of Oregon State. So you don't know. But all in all, I think that I break it down like this, and I think this is what's important. You're looking for 12 to 13 starters / contributors on your team by the time they're juniors, right? Yes. Texas already has 15 in the 2 deep. And this is not, and this is why it's a breakthrough class, in my opinion, Jerry. This is not a Texas team that's struggling to be in the top 25. This is a preseason top 5 team that has 15 guys from a single recruiting class in the 2 deep. I think that is why I call this the breakthrough class for Steve Sarkisian. It was ranked number 3 overall. Very clear that it's that one. But you just look at it. I think that everywhere they've got 5 current starters, and Arch Manning is on the way. The rest will fill in the blanks. Got to see whether or not some guys like Sadir Mitchell, possibly Connor Stroh, guys like that actually move up in this category as well. Even Spencer Shannon, maybe. We'll see. But certainly it's off to the right track and good stuff here. All right, that's going to do it for the 2023 recruiting breakdown. I think it's important for us to do this every so often to give you a sense of how recruiting classes are doing in retrospect. 22, the foundation. I think 23 is the breakthrough. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. Hook 'em.